Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Niani Tolbert, and I am the founder and CEO of Hire Black Now. I'm on a mission to get 10,000 Black women hired, trained, and promoted to corporate roles, and I am so honored and thrilled to be here and joined by these three fabulous women. I am honored to moderate today's session on fighting for equal pay, and this conversation is incredibly important for our entire community. Why is this conversation important? It's important because the average Black woman makes 58 cents for every dollar earned by an average white male per US Census data. This means that it takes Black women an extra 9+ months to make the same amount that a white man earned in the previous year. This costs the average Black woman over $900,000 in her 40-year career span. And this is not just a loss for Black women. This is a loss for our families, this is a loss for our communities, and this is a loss for generations to come. We are here to talk today about what really needs to happen to bring equity into our paychecks. And we have the perfect panel to talk about this right now, okay? I am joined by Exum, VP of Total Rewards, Executive Corporate and E-Commerce at Walmart. So we VP, y'all. Yvette Gordon, Senior Counsel at ADP. Oh, I see ADP is in the building.
That's not fair. She has a whole peer group here.
And Angela Reddock-Wright, Esquire, Employment Attorney and Mediator at Reddock Law Group. Now I'm going to give them their flowers. Ellen leads design and strategy for Walmart's executive compensation plans and incentives, and recently added the leadership of Sam's Club, Total Rewards agenda to her role. She has a passion for pay equity and the work that enables it. That's why she's here. Ellen is a Total Rewards executive with more than 30 years of experience delivering strategies and solutions for large, complex, multinational corporations, including PepsiCo, IBM, and Walmart. You see Sam's Club, too. She has diverse experiences from leading one of the largest transformations in U.S. history of an employer Medicare-eligible group plan to a private exchange for IBM, leading compensation through M&A deals to serve as compensation lead for the Walmart Board of Compensation Committee. Let's give her some flowers. Thank you for being here, Ellen.
Thank you.
Now let's talk about Yvette, because she has a fan club. Yvette is a seasoned employment attorney with over 25 years of experience representing and advising employers on the full spectrum of issues affecting their workplace and human capital, including accommodations, diversity, equity, and inclusion. She currently serves as the Senior Counsel for ADP, where she is a trusted advisor and partner to human resource professionals and business leaders. She holds a BA in Sociology and African American Studies from Brown University and a JD from New York University School of Law. Let's talk about Angela now, all right? Angela, in her near 30-year legal career, Angela has litigated, investigated, and now mediates some of the nation's most sensitive and high-profile Title IX cases, including cases involving race and gender discrimination, sexual harassment, and pay equity. In addition to being named a Best Lawyer in America by U.S. News and World Report, Angela also hosts a weekly radio show on Tavis Smiley's KBLA Talk 1580 entitled Legal Lens with Angela Reddock-Wright. Angela is a graduate of UCLA School of Law and Amherst College, and
Go Bruins.
recently published a book, so add author to that line, called The Workplace Transformed, 7 Crucial Lessons from the global pandemic. Let's give them all a round of applause. So as a moderator, I'm gonna ask something from y'all, okay? Is that all right? Okay. All right, when something resonates with you all, I want y'all to snap, clap, or give me a mm-hmm, because we'd like to know what resonates with you all, okay? So let's practice. Snap. All right. I want to hear a clap. Yes. And let's get a mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what I want to hear. Okay, so something, and I'm still going to ask them to do it, something that I always encourage my members and my clients to do is to stop being humble and brag about their accomplishments. I encourage them to take clippings of testimonials and their achievements and their KPIs to organize themselves a brag book, all right? And I encourage you guys to do this as well when you get home. This brag book should be a reminder of the stories that you can bring into interviews and performance reviews, so secure your bags and gather your coins. Now, I'm going to ask these incredible Black women, who I just bragged about, to brag about themselves for a minute each, all right? And I'd love to hear the sisterhood support, the snaps, the claps, and the after each of these ladies. Let's start with Ellen.
Thank you. So my number one accomplishment is my family. So my beautiful Black family. I've been with my husband for 30 years. We have 3 beautiful children. We have a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And my mentors in my life are my oldest siblings. I'm the youngest of 5. So from my oldest brother to my other brother. So my biggest accomplishment is being able to do this and be surrounded by my family and continue to build my family.
Thank you. Yes. Now let's go to Yvette.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I would say along similar lines that I'm a single mother by choice. I adopted my son, who's almost 8, when he was 13 days old. And I have been, thank you. I've been doing this and all that motherhood requires, just me. Not to say that I don't have a strong support network. I have extended family, but all the challenges of keeping a career going and raising a family, that I'm pretty proud of myself for managing that without a partner.
Wonderful. I really appreciate that these ladies started with bragging about their family and just being examples of our lives are not just about work and just about who we see when we're at conferences like this, but it's about so much more. So in that same vein, I'm just really proud to be the daughter of a single mother. Parents divorced early. They're originally from Birmingham, Alabama, come from a great line of women, grandmothers, aunts, moms, her sister, and my grandmother Fleta in particular inspired me the most. She was a home health care worker back in Birmingham, Alabama, which is where we're from. And I remember at the age of 7 walking the picket lines with her as she advocated and her coworkers advocated for better rights and benefits for their coworkers. So I feel like being here today and the work that I get to do every day really just stems from that inspiration and having so many strong women in my life. And I'm fortunate to have an amazing husband who's here videotaping, who, when I got married late in life, so an example of, if you still have that desire and it hasn't come in your 20s, 30s, that it could come later. And in marrying him, I went from 0 to 60, no biological children, but he has 3 adult kids, and we together now have 10 little grandkids. So my weekends are all birthday parties and all family stuff. So happy to have a break and be here in Vegas.
I love the fact that we all, well, I'm going to join too, but I love the fact that you all shared about your family. Because when we make money for ourselves, we make money to provide for that family. We make money as Black people. We are helping our sisters, our brothers, our fake nieces, our real nieces, our nephews, nibblings, all of them, godchildren, all right, okay? So that's the reason why we need to negotiate and make sure we get paid. I want to share my own great space in this safe space. One of my biggest accomplishments is being here with you all and with my mom, the single mother that raised me. And we're not gonna cry because we just started and we gotta get the questions. But I'm just so honored to be with you guys because my mom raised me and always talked about Black enterprise and always talked about coming to the summit. And here we are for the first time together. So just want to say that. All right, so let's start off with some warm-up questions. All right, so in 3 words, before we start up, who's ready to talk about money? Yeah? Ready to talk about getting money? Talk about getting money, all right? So let's start off with these warm-up questions. In 3 words or less, what is a root cause of why Black women earn less? So I'm gonna start with Yvette.
Building on historical bias.
All right. Let's get that. That's fine. She's talking about we're gonna use as many as we need. I love that. Angela, how about you?
Like Yvette, bias, lack of knowledge, and courage.
Yes. And what about you, Ellen?
Systems of inequities.
Ooh. Okay. And we're gonna break all of that down right now. Our story as Black women has always been one about overcoming. We as Black women are door openers and glass breakers. Is anyone willing to share a story from their personal money or negotiation journey? Let's start off with Angela.
Okay, thank you. Great question. So as she indicated, I've been practicing law for about 30 years. When I graduated from law school, my first job was with an employment law firm representing employers in all aspects of employment law. And it was a boutique firm, and I was a first-year associate there. And I remember, I'm the first in my family, like I'm sure many of us are, to go to college, go to graduate school, become a professional. And so even working in my summer law clerkships, I made more money as a summer law clerk than some of my family members would make just on their regular long-term jobs. So my family was already very proud, like, wow, you make so much money, that's awesome. And then in my first job, I remember getting the offer letter, and I could see it clearly to this day. It was $60,000. That was in 1995. Yeah, 1995. And that was good money by those standards then. And I live in Los Angeles. But at the time, the market was a little bit higher for first-year associates. And part of what I'm going to recommend to you all today is research, know the market. So me, young, go-getter first-year associate, researched the market, and not knowing any better, kind of marched into the partner's office like, I'm really grateful to be here. I'm so excited to be here, but I need a little bit more money. This is not market rate, and I feel I need to be commensurate with my fellow first-year associates across the board. And they were a little taken aback. It's just not something you do as a first-year associate. But they actually did end up increasing my salary, and as a result, increased the salary across the board for other associates, even associates that were hired greater in years. So to this day, the folks that I worked with during that time, they, teased me. They were like, Angela was our union rep. She marched in there and she got it done. And so, but I would say that was a little bit naive, because it's probably not best practice, your first job, just marching in. But, thank God for my naivete at that time.
Angela gonna get it done. I love that because that shows how when you open doors, you also open doors for others when you open doors for yourself. Does anyone else have a personal story to share?
Yeah, I can share one. Early in my career, I was blessed to have what we now call headhunters or recruiters, or I'm not sure what your vernacular is that makes you comfortable. But I was fortunate enough for them to tell me, hey, Ellen, if you really want to do what you want to do, you need to go global, and global is where the money's at, right? So I was super fortunate to have that advice and counsel. And very early on, I was like, okay, well, I'm not leaving this job for less than 20% more. I don't care what the job opportunity is. I'm not leaving. I need relocation benefits because I was all about that lump sum. I needed to sign on because at that time I was trying to get financial stability. I was trying to get grounded. I was trying to do all of that stuff. And that was my rule of thumb. And I just went through the jobs kind of like that. And then as I progressed, and of course had children, then I started to realize that it's not just the 20% you have to get. It's like what you have to do for that 20%. And more recently, I've been learning about this glass cliff. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's the glass cliff where they give women jobs that are, harder than the other jobs, that are more difficult than the other jobs, that are in positions that are potentially a failure, and they give them to us. And I realized I was so psychologically absorbed by what people were telling me, I would actually go after those jobs. I was like, I'm the fix-it person. I go to M&As, startups, acquisitions, spins, right, because I can fix it. So now I ask the question of, what do I have to do for that money? Because as my peers are, potentially doing like run the business jobs or more cushy jobs, when evaluation time comes around and they're calibrating, if I'm successful and you're successful, but I had a glass cliff job and you didn't have a glass cliff job, my expectation is I am going to get more money for that successful than you're getting from your successful. And having those conversations now with my leader, my manager, my peers is super important to me because I still like those jobs. I still like the fix-it jobs. But now I realize when they say you're the highest paid or you're one of the highest paid, I'm like, and? Right. Like, I should be, right? Because I'm doing this, right? So.
I love what you said there. I love how you talked about the glass cliff and also how you spoke about being a fixer. By a show of hands, has anyone considered themselves a fixer? I know, I see a lot of people. Because as Black women, we fix it all. All right? And so let's get paid. Let's get paid more for being the fixer. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ellen. All right, and Yvette?
I have a story probably about a lesson learned. Years ago, I started a new job, and during the interview stage was told, here's what we're looking at in terms of salary in the event that we make you the offer. Sounded fine. I get the job, and the salary offer was actually even a little bit more than what I'd been told at the outset. So here I am, yay, me. And I let it end there instead of saying, okay, thank you. What else is there? What else might I be offered? And in fact, what I hadn't thought about was, and I think a lot of companies, if you have a bonus, it's based on your fiscal year performance. I was starting the job more than halfway through the fiscal year. And so the bonus is prorated based on the number of months that you're there. And so I'm thinking, here's my bonus target, yay. And I get maybe less than half of what I'm anticipating for that year. And so what I came to learn is there may be salary ranges that an employer expects to pay, but there are certain sweeteners that are outside of whatever the established ranges are. Whether it's, since I'm taking a hit, based on when I'm starting the role, since I'm taking a hit in the bonus, maybe there's opportunity, okay, can I have some more vacation time in that first year? How about a signing bonus, which hadn't been something that even crossed my mind at the time when I was starting the position. And your strongest bargaining position is at the time they're making you the offer. And so if you can think about what else might there be that I haven't even thought to ask about, it just doesn't hurt to ask questions and say, what else can you do for me? Is this the best offer?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing your stories. Appreciate that. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing those stories as well. Now, Ellen, since you Total Rewards VP, what do you believe needs to happen at the organizational level to close the pay gap?
Yeah, so I think trust, honesty, right? Bringing things to light. But I think there's fundamental things that need to happen from an employer perspective and from your perspective. The first is what we call job architecture. Like, you have to know what similarly situated jobs are, right? So to know your worth and to do the research that you're talking about in market data, you wouldn't expect a VP of HR at Total Rewards to get paid as the same of a specialized VP in tech, because the market pays different for those two things. But you do have to know similarly situated and the level of jobs within an organization, whether it's an executive job, a manager job, a coordinator job, analyst job, and you have to understand like how to group people in those levels. That is the foundation of being able to pay fairly and pay in a less subjective environment. The second is to create pay structures around those jobs. But in all the pay structures I have seen, pay structures, especially for larger organizations, they have to cover a lot of jobs within that range. So really understanding what I call micro ranges, like what your HR job pays versus what your tech job pay, where you should be within that range is incumbent upon us as the employer and incumbent upon you as the associate to really understand what that is. Those are foundations of what the legal system is based on when we can say that we pay you equitably. The other thing you need to know is when we say the legal minimum that we pay you equitably is based on groups of men, groups of women, similarly situated. That doesn't mean you are paid fairly. That means you are in a group that is paid fairly, right? So I feel like for organizations, you can't just do the legal minimum. You have to go down to the individual level. What are like people in that job based on criteria? It's not random, right? So like I said before, I don't want to get paid for the same as my counterpart who doesn't have the same level of performance as me, doesn't have the same level of experience that I bring to the table, doesn't have the same level of leadership accountabilities that I have. But if all things were the same, then it should be. But it's equal pay for equal work, not equal pay, right? So organizations need to really understand that, and you really need to understand that. So building the principle in an organization based on a foundation of data and information, I think is really what needs to get it started. That still doesn't mean that you might not be equally paid by chance, what we call by chance, or by unconscious bias. But once you have those in place, you have a system for you to challenge, and then a system for corrections to be made.
I love that. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing on that? I really appreciate what Ellen said, and just kind of from a legal perspective, I agree, companies have to have the architecture in place and the structure in place so you have something by which to judge by and that you can challenge. Companies that are creating these processes, when you get to that level of trying to distinguish between, okay, we're paying Ellen and Yvette at the same level, they're doing the same type of work, but, we want to be able to reward one or the other for extra performance or going above and beyond. What companies have to be really careful of in those instances when you're trying to show slight differences is the criteria has to be really objective. I think about a case I investigated last year. A woman, Caucasian woman, filed an internal complaint for gender discrimination and pay discrimination, claiming that she was leading this particular department but was underpaid compared to other leaders of other white male leaders of other departments. And when I interviewed one of the head of the overall group to try to understand, well, what's the differential in pay? Why the differential in pay with her versus her male colleagues? And he used words like, well, John had more executive presence, or John just had a way of engaging, right? But not really being able to quantify it. And then I'm like, well, what do you mean by executive presence? Like, how do you describe that? When you have a white woman, you have a white male, like, is it because the guy, by chance, he happens to be tall, handsome, by those standards, and very gregarious and engaging. So I think that's probably what he meant, but that's not an appropriate way to determine if one person deserves, a higher performance bonus than another person. So yeah, I'm sure part of the training that you all give your teams internally is, so even once we have the structure in place, we still have to have truly objective criteria that we can, speak to and that we can quantify.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love being very objective.
Yeah.
That's something that I work on when it comes to my clients. And we have similarly a role matrix to where, what is each role? Every department needs to understand what exactly is each role. So every department head or lead needs to say, if you're an associate, this is what you do. If you are a manager, this is what you do. So that when you start to actually get more roles, then that's where you need to come in the performance review and say, I'm doing the role of a manager, and we see that role here, so I need to be in this range. That's something that we implemented in the last place that I was employed at as well, and that really, really allowed for us to see who we are taking advantage of and who we really need to rethink. So really having a transparent matrix and role guide is something that I always encourage employers to have.
Mm-hmm. And that the analysis is ongoing, that the changes in compensation are fluid. Mm-hmm. And so an adjustment this year doesn't mean that 3 years from now you're set, because pay ranges will shift, market influences come and go, and so the analysis, you should never stop asking whether or not you're still where you should be, given your experience, your tenure, et cetera.
Totally agree. Utopia would be at every hire. You run them through these pay systems, and there's companies out there that do them, and we use them. Every hire, you can tell whether you're throwing off your pay equity, because compression is real, right? New hires coming in, we have to fill that position. It's hard to fill. You're sitting there doing the same job, but we need somebody else, and they're coming in getting paid more than you, right? So utopia would be like every hire, every transfer, every promotion, every demotion, there should be hygiene that goes around that, and you see how it impacts the population.
Yeah. And talking about someone getting paid for doing the same job, right now we are in a remote world, where a lot of teams are distributed. Originally, a significant factor in compensation calculation, and still, has been the cost of living index that a company was located in. Now that we are distributed in remote teams, is it fair to still offer different compensation depending on an employee's cost of living index? Let's ask Yvette.
I would say actually yes, that is, I think that's pretty standard and pretty typical, that if you're living and working in a location like California or New York, where notoriously higher standard, more expensive standard of living in those locations, that if you're outside of a location like that, not necessarily that you should expect to be not making the same pay, but it would not be unusual, and certainly would not be an indication of any sort of something other than legitimate consideration that you would be subject to those kinds of limitations based on your location.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have anything to add?
Let me start with, I do not represent Walmart when I make this statement. My opinion. I say it depends. So it depends on the level, the hourly. Like, a CEO lives in New York, who lives in California, who lives in, Alabama. Like, I don't think there's differentials for, like, depending on the officer level that you're going, that you are in. I also think we have to be very clear on what we mean about cost of living, because when you're looking at salary surveys, they're talking about cost of living, like housing, like food, like things of that nature. When you hear some of the groups that are advocating for cost of living, minimum wage, there are many more factors that are included in that, and those are some of the systemic inequities of maybe I live in New York and it's more expensive because I have nowhere else to live because I'm living with my parents, right? I can't leave New York because if I went to Florida, lower cost of living, I would have nowhere to live, right? Or maybe my cost of living is because I have chosen to have 3 children, right? Whereas my sister chose to have 1. My cost of living is higher than her cost of living, right? So in my opinion, the organization's obligations around cost of living, it depends, right? That would be my opinion.
I would say that this is an area that I think it's still an open question just because it is so new, where companies now are letting employees work remotely, and some companies are saying you got to come back, and employees are trying to negotiate still to work remotely. So what I think may happen is for companies that say, you know, we're very generous. If you want to work remotely from anywhere in the world, that's fine. We don't care as long as you get your job done. In that instance, I think the company probably has a duty to make sure, because it's all about the work then, right? It's not about your location, to make sure that you're being similarly paid for similarly situated work as your colleagues doing the same work, no matter where you are in the world. But if a company has a policy where it's like, no, really, you need to be in your seat in Iowa or in New York or what have you, but they may give you some, you know, leeway and allow you to work from any place else, then in those instances, they're probably gonna say, this is really a seat based in Iowa, so we're gonna pay, whether you live in the Caribbean or LA or New York or what have you, we're gonna pay you based on Iowa salary. And so I think it really depends on what the policy is, and I also think it's open for question just because it's so new for the world right now, everything we're dealing with post-pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. We're still an ongoing conversation, still figuring everything out, right? And so, Ellen, can you tell me what are some other or non-monetary and monetary benefits that people should think about when, aside from their salary, when they're negotiating?
Sure. So monetary, the typical is base, which is your salary you get on a weekly or biweekly basis. Your annual incentives, which is your short-term incentives. It's usually a lump sum annual cash incentive. And equity. Equity is stock the company gives you that vest over time, right? So you might not get those annually. Some of the non-monetary could be, oh, well, let me go back. Some of the negotiable monetary would also be what companies have called spot awards or one-time awards or project awards or things of that nature, where you might see you may or may not see your colleagues getting them because some companies make them very public and some companies do not. But if you finish a big project and you know there's a spot award program in place, make sure you understand what qualifies for it and if there's consideration or ask for consideration for your project. If you have a team in advance of accomplishing the project, you can ask for, if the team gets here, can I give out whatever this lump sum might be? Of course, there's the non-monetary things like paid time off that you can pay people for when they're taking the time off. There's conferences like this, like getting education and things of that nature. There's certifications that you can get. My personal favorite, because I actually tried it myself later in my career, but these executive coaches or these coaches that I used to hear about people getting coaches because they had challenges or opportunities to lead in certain scenarios. And then I started to hear about what these people were learning and how much it was accelerating their career for having these coaches, even though they were starting on the downside or they were starting on something to improve. And I realized I was at a pivotal point in my career where I knew what got me here wasn't going to get me to the next level. And I asked for a coach, which is actually fairly expensive, right? It was more than my salary, my first 2 years of salary, I think, at the beginning of my career. And they said yes. And they said yes. And when they said yes, I used it to the nth degree and demonstrated what that coach did for me and changed, certain things. So the company had value from it. But there's things like that I would have never even thought about asking for because I always thought it was for something else, for something that wasn't as positive as I now know. And I've told other people they've asked and they've gotten it too.
Yeah, That's good. Yes.
I-
And I just wanted to add real quick, with the conferences, is that I heard that someone negotiated for not only them to attend conferences, but for their children to have a flight. So that's something that I was clapping about, because how wonderful is it to not only ask your company to not only take you to the conference, but make sure that your children come with you. So that's something that I just want to pull out there.
I just want to amplify something that Ellen said about the coaching or any other benefit you might be asking your employer for, is that it was a benefit to you, but it was also a benefit to them. And I think when you're asking, when you're trying to negotiate for those sorts of benefits, that's the sort of thing that you want to be able to make the case for, that this is not just me so I can use it for my own purposes, but you, employer, will also benefit from my having had this experience if you can provide that for me.
That's a great amplification, Yvette. I think whenever you have that ask, right, and even in the beginning of the ask, can I do this so that I can bring this impact, right? So that's great. Thank you.
And just remember that we're living in a time of the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, and all the other terminology we're hearing these days. So you are a commodity. Companies want you. They need you. They need great people. So when you start with a company, your start is your best opportunity to negotiate what you want. To look down the road 6 months or a year later, say, I should have negotiated this, is much harder at that time. So really take time to reflect on that offer, do your research to see what other types of benefits and rewards are out there in the world, and what's reasonable to ask that company. I think another thing you want to negotiate, especially being at your level, you want to make sure your title is reflective of a career path and trajectory that you want, and your job description, that it reflects what you're doing, where you want to go, and I don't know if you can get this in negotiations, but kind of a commitment from that manager, that company, that they're going to be supporting you through your career. And maybe that looks like executive coaching or extra training or certifications or what have you. But you get one bite at the apple, really, so you want to take advantage of it at the beginning, and you want it to be in writing. I cannot tell you how many times I've advised people who, are separating from their companies or have issues, and they're like, they told me they were going to do this and that. And I look at their offer letter, and it's not there. Yeah. So it's really just their word against the company's word. So as much as possible, you want to make sure it's documented.
I want to just say that Angela said something that I don't think y'all heard, because I didn't hear the snaps. I want you guys to hear that she said you guys are a commodity, all right? So I'm going to ask for y'all to do something. Turn to your neighbor. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, I am a hot commodity.
You're a hot commodity.
Turn to your other neighbor and say, neighbor, watch out now. Watch out now. All right. Thank you for reminding us of that. We needed to hear it.
Can I just add one more thing to that? I entirely agree with you said earlier, and you just said that when you're negotiating to start a job, it's your best time. However, it's not the last time. There are 3 other times. The best time to do it once you've been with a company, just in case you just started and you're like, man, I should have done this. I just talked to a young lady at this conference, and she just got promoted. Annual review. During your annual review, and you're talking about your annual merit increase, that's when you get your information. You gather all the facts you can, understand what you should be paid, and have that conversation during that pay discussion. You get your chance once a year, definitely, right, when you're going through your annual review. The second time is when you get promoted. When you get promoted, a lot of us are like, I'm so happy to get promoted. Like, this is so good, right? But that's the time where you get the information, and then you have the conversation, and sometimes it's entirely fair. If I did your offer, it would be entirely fair. But sometimes it's not entirely fair, right? Sometimes we're missing something, or, we forgot something. So that's another time. Or lateral moves. Like, a lot of times companies are like, it's the same job, it's the same level, there's no additional pay. it's all for your growth and development, right? And then you're like, okay, but now that I'm laterally moved in a different group, how do I get paid in comparison to this new group that I'm in? So there are times, it's not too late if you just started your job. There are other times in your career that you can have these discussions, but you should come prepared with the facts, right? With the data. There's a tremendous amount of sources where you can see where your jobs are paid, particularly in New York, like where we're publishing our rates, but salary.com. I mean, I'm not gonna advertise all the different companies or plug any companies, but there's all types of public sites that are available where you can see what you should be paid. But probably the most important nugget I can give you is you're not alone. Talk to each other. Talk to your peers, talk to your siblings, talk to your white colleagues, because they know, right? And not feel uncomfortable asking that question because they are definitely talking to each other.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I really want to encourage everybody to start talking about money. A lot of us were raised to say it's rude to talk about money, but we need to start talking about money. We need to tell each other how much we're making so that we can be like, you're not making enough, right? And another thing, I want to just put out some resources as well. There are a few resources that we have at Hire Black Now to know if you're getting paid well. One is that we have an offer analyzer. It's in beta, okay? So if you go to careers.hireblacknow.com and you look at resources, you can make your free account, and then see where you are at when it comes to the different rewards that you were offered. So you can even look at that for what you're doing now. We also have a transparent salary database with over 2,000 anonymously submitted salaries so that you can kind of have an understanding, and we'll take some questions. We might be able to take some questions after. All right, sorry? Oh, I got you. All right. So it's called careers.hireblacknow.com, and you'll see it under resources, offer analyzer. Also on hireblacknow.com, there is over 2,000 anonymously submitted salaries in our salary database, and you can actually filter through industries or even like what you said, Ellen, when it comes to job function, to see what people are making and filter by even states. So that's great. And just another thing that I share is I like to really encourage people to get a market analysis report. 81 cents, so 81cents.com has one for about $2.50. And I'm gonna try to look for a coupon code for y'all. Okay, so if y'all follow me on LinkedIn, I'm gonna put that out. But it's about a 24-page report for you to get from recruiters and hiring managers, a customized report based on your experience. And so, although it is $250 with it, which is money, right? I think it's really important for you all to not lose, hundreds of, thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars in order to, get the money that you deserve, okay? So I just want to share that real quick, okay?
I'll give you some props for that. I'll be using it.
Yes, come and use it. All right, so now let's talk about progress. We have about 5 minutes left. So I kind of want to, A, ask you guys, how can we keep in touch with you? And B, what is one thing that you need every Black woman to know about negotiating? So let's make it a quick round, a fire round. So let's start off with Ellen.
Know your worth, ground yourself in data, you're not alone.
All right, and how can we keep up with you?
For you, I will start to use LinkedIn.
Yes! Not Yvette.
Same, LinkedIn, Yvette Gordon. I think my advice, don't be afraid to ask questions of your manager, of your compensation team. Ask questions, not with a sense of entitlement, why am I not receiving whatever it is that you believe is lacking, but to gather information because that knowledge is power, and that helps you build up toward the argument that you might want to make about why what you're receiving is not adequate.
Thank you. And Angela.
I can't believe we're out of time. We had so much more we wanted to cover. But you can follow me on my website at angelareddock-wright.com and also on LinkedIn. And my biggest piece of advice, which I was hoping we would get to today, is knowledge, particularly knowledge around the legal issues. So I'll just give a quick example. In California and states like California, like New York and New York, California, the coastal states for sure have very progressive equal pay laws. So in California, we have the standard law that says, if you're doing the same job, similarly situated, et cetera, you should be paid equally, independent of gender, race, ethnicity, et cetera. But most importantly, now California has in place, and many states do, that employers cannot ask in the recruitment stage, in the pre-job phase or the pre-offer stage, about your prior employment or salary history, right? Not your prior employment, but your prior salary history. And that's really critical because we all remember on the job application used to say, what did you make at your prior place? So now, at least in California, New York, I know for sure, and many other states, that question is no longer allowed. They can ask post-offer, but even still, as Yvette and Ellen have said, even still has to go into a formula that's still equal and ensures people are properly paid. And then in California and other states now, employers are now required to do an annual audit of their pay practices, and within that audit to employers of 100 employees or more in California to disclose what the pay scales are based on race, ethnicity, et cetera. So there's been a lot of work legislatively to help employers as they try to be more transparent and do the right thing when it comes to pay. So educate yourself on your state's laws and use that to be equipped as you go to your performance reviews, as you negotiate offer letters.
Thank you, thank you.
Knowledge is power.
Yes, yes. And I have one thing to share. It's time that we stop working twice as hard for half as much, all right? So that's what I want to say. You deserve every single penny and then some. So you guys can connect with me on LinkedIn, but before y'all connect, I want y'all to look at somebody else and say, neighbor, you are worth every penny.
You are worth every penny.
And then some.
And then some.
Turn to your other neighbor, somebody that you never saw before. Neighbor. Say neighbor. It's time we stop accepting.
It's time to stop accepting
Half as much.
half as much.
All right. Thank you all for coming. You guys can connect with all of us at LinkedIn. If you guys want to talk to us, we'll be outside so that we can turn to the next panel. Thank you all.
And I have a book signing in the exhibit hall, so you can come talk to me there. Thanks.
Yes.